Think IRS penalties are permanent once they hit your account? The IRS has a rule called First-Time Penalty Abatement, and most taxpayers never ask for it. In the right situation, it wipes out thousands of dollars in penalties with a single phone call. If the IRS hit you with penalties you can't afford, call Silver Tax Group at 855-900-1040 or visit us at silvertaxgroup.com for a confidential review. You may qualify for relief you didn't know existed. I'm Chad Silver, tax attorney and founder of Silver Tax Group. I've helped clients remove tens of thousands of dollars in IRS penalties, often using the same abatement programs the IRS doesn't advertise. Today, I'm covering the 3 legal ways to get IRS penalties removed, starting with the first-time abatement rule, then reasonable cause, and finally the statutory exceptions, plus the one mistake that kills your abatement request before the IRS even reads it. Section 1. First-time penalty abatement, the rule the IRS doesn't advertise. First-time abatement, FTA, is the simplest, fastest way to get IRS penalties removed, and most taxpayers have never heard of it. Here's how it works. If you've been compliant for the 3 years before the year the penalty was assessed, meaning no penalties of any kind, the IRS will remove failure to file, failure to pay, and failure to deposit penalties for 1 tax year. 1 phone call, 1 request, penalties gone. The requirements are specific. You must have filed all required returns or a valid extension. You must have paid all tax due or be in an active installment agreement. And you must have a clean 3-year penalty history. If you check those 3 boxes, the IRS is required to grant the abatement. I had a client, we'll call him David. David filed his 2025 return 6 weeks late. The IRS assessed a failure to file penalty of about $4,600. David had been spotless for the previous 10 years. Never a late filing, never a penalty. I called the IRS Practitioner Priority Service, requested first-time abatement, and the penalty was removed during the call. 4 minutes, $4,600 gone. Here's what most people get wrong. They pay the penalty without questioning it. They assume the IRS doesn't make mistakes and doesn't grant mercy. But FTA is not mercy. It's an administrative policy written into the Internal Revenue Manual. The IRS agent on the phone is required to grant it if you qualify. The bottom line, if you have a clean compliance history and this is your first penalty, do not pay it. Request first-time abatement. Section 2. Reasonable cause when FTA doesn't apply. If you don't qualify for first-time abatement, maybe you had a penalty 3 years ago, maybe this is your second time, you go to reasonable cause. Reasonable cause means something outside your control prevented you from filing or paying on time, and the standard is higher than most people think. The IRS recognizes specific categories: death in the immediate family, serious illness that incapacitated you or your immediate family member, natural disaster that destroyed your records or prevented filing, unable to obtain records despite diligent effort, bad advice from a tax professional, and this one is tricky because you have to prove you provided all necessary information and the professional made the error, not you. What does not qualify? You couldn't afford to pay. You were too busy. You forgot. You didn't understand the tax code. You were traveling. Your accountant dropped the ball without your knowledge. None of these meet the reasonable cause standard. I'll give you a real example. We'll call her Patricia. Patricia's husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She was his primary caregiver for 14 months, managing treatments, hospital visits, end-of-life care. During that period, she missed a tax filing and a payment. The IRS assessed about $8,300 in combined penalties. We submitted a reasonable cause abatement request with medical records, a timeline, and a detailed narrative. The IRS granted full abatement. That's the standard. Extraordinary circumstances, thoroughly documented. The bottom line, reasonable cause is not a sob story. It's documented proof that something extraordinary and outside your control prevented compliance. Section 3. Statutory exceptions, when the IRS made the mistake. The third path is statutory exceptions, and this one puts the IRS on the defense. If the IRS made an error that caused or contributed to your penalty, you may be entitled to relief. The most common scenario, the IRS sent incorrect written advice, and you relied on it. You called the IRS. They told you something that turned out to be wrong. You acted on their advice. The penalty isn't on you, but you have to prove it. The date of the call, the name of the agent if you have it, what they told you, and how you relied on it. Another scenario, the IRS delayed processing your return or payment and penalized you for their own delay. You submitted your return with payment. The IRS lost it, or sat on it, or misapplied the payment, and then penalized you for late payment. That's a statutory exception. And here's one people miss. If you were in a federally declared disaster area, the IRS grants automatic extensions for filing and payment. Penalties assessed during the disaster period are abated as a matter of law. You don't need FTA or reasonable cause. You just need to be in the disaster zone. The bottom line, if the IRS contributed to the problem, don't pay for their mistake. Document everything and request a statutory exception. Section 4, the one mistake that kills your abatement. Here's the trap. You request penalty abatement. The IRS grants it, penalties are removed, and then you file late again the next year, or you miss a payment. Now you've got a new penalty, and first-time abatement is gone, you used it on the previous year, and reasonable cause is harder to prove the second time around. Penalty abatement is a one-time fix for most people. Once the IRS removes penalties under FTA, your slate is not wiped clean. Your compliance clock resets. You need 3 more clean years before you're eligible for FTA again. If you repeat the behavior that got you penalized in the first place, you've burned your best option. This is where strategy matters. I've had clients who want to request abatement the moment they get a penalty notice. But sometimes it's better to wait, file the return, pay the tax, get current on everything, and then request abatement. You want your compliance record to look as clean as possible when the IRS reviews your request. The bottom line, penalty abatement is a tool. Use it at the right time, in the right way, with a plan to stay compliant afterward. If you use it casually and repeat the same mistakes, you've wasted your best shot at penalty relief. If the IRS hit you with penalties, whether it's your first time and FTA applies, or you need reasonable cause, or you think the IRS made an error, don't just pay them. You may have grounds for full abatement. At Silver Tax Group, we review your penalty history, your compliance record, and the specific circumstances of your case before we request anything. We build your defense strategy, we handle the IRS communication, and we'll fight the penalties if the IRS denies your request. Call us at 855-900-1040 or visit silvertaxgroup.com for a confidential review. Don't pay IRS penalties until you know whether they can be removed. I'm tax attorney Chad Silver. If you found this helpful, click like below. Subscribe for more IRS defense and tax resolution content. Thanks for watching.